of turnover in public accounting did a survey, got the results of the survey, and basically what it said was the students, the employees, the young employees were relatively happy with a lot of the issues, but the benefit issue was big with them, and compensation issue was bigger than them, because any 2-year person could go to work at J.P. Morgan Chase and get a big raise. I said, but that's not in their best interest. And the problem with public accounting is they take a 22, 23-year-old person and said that the goal is partnership. But who's going to make partner? 2 out of 100. So that's not an incentive. I said, but the real incentive should be we make manager, because public accounting gives you great experience, and leave at the manager level. And if you believe that, you have to find a way to support it. And we found a way to support it, both in terms of the job you got when you left it as a 2-year person versus the job you got leaving as a 6 or 7-year person. And that thing became the genesis of a program I did. I was invited. I call it the chicken and the hound in the chicken coop. I would go in and I would have 100 first and second year people at Price Waterhouse and Deloitte and all the firms. I love this thing, and I would tell them, look, and I told it to senior partners in the firm. I said, you give me 100 kids, there are 30 on the left that you can't keep no matter what, and there are 30 on the right that you can't lose. I talked to the 60 in the middle, or 20 on 20. I talked to the ones in the middle, the ones that are out looking for a job and are thinking about staying. And it was amazing. And then they used to send me people who quit and went in and quit, and I would turn them around, and they loved that. And all their partners, work with us, and they would recommend us to their clients, and that was a great start for the firm.
So I want to recap, because we just covered a ton of ground there.
I know.
First of all, before we get too far, I want to thank you for your service and appreciate you talking about some of your friends that didn't come back the same way. I know, that it's clear that they're still with you in your heart. Also want to give credit to the Marines for building up your confidence, right? And I think probably put you in a good position to succeed at sales when those opportunities eventually opened up. Okay, so, you were approached by some friends, hey, want to start a business. You didn't have any experience in the staffing business that they wanted to start here. So you're like, hey, I know the public accounting side of things. And you came up with this idea of, let me go out to these competing firms, talk to all their HR folks, and form kind of a networking support group. Is that like a good way to describe it? Okay. And a big part of what you were able to do is to help them see, yes, you guys compete for these resources and those resources, but there's a lot that we can share and learn together. And big thing that you wanted to do was to try to reduce the turnover that was taking place, as well as support all of these young new accountants that are coming into the field, right? Help them sort of find the right path forward. How have I done here? What did I miss?
No, that's a very good summation. The thing was, the funny part about it is the day after I did this, I'd get 20 resumes from the audience, and they were very valuable candidates because all the firms wanted 2 and 3 year people out of public accounting. And I would get in touch. I would counsel them, and I would tell them again, I think the best bet is to stay 6, 7 years experience wise and so on and so forth. But if you just can't do it because it's very demanding. Let's see what we can do. And that was, so we had the candidates and the client, my CPA firms. I said, I'm not going to charge you for these, for the presentations, nor for turning a kid around. I would turn 1 out of 3 kids that quit and and accepted an offer. I would turn them around, and by explaining again, this and this and this. And I had people years later, partners in the CPA firms, came, Frankie, your lecture, it changed my vista. My goal became get that 6 or 7 years in. By the time I did that, the work got better, the responsibility got better. But in the meantime, I would meet all the partners in the CPA firms, and they would send their clients to me. And when I was recommended by the partner on the job, I was no longer just a recruiter, I was a consultant to them. And that's how we developed so many clients, and that was a real benefit. But the bottom line is you never know where you're going, because I didn't know what the hell I was doing when I did this, okay? I just said
This
if I'm
wasn't
gonna
like a well thought out strategy. I'm going to do
absolutely
X
not.
and
You know,
Y is
life's
going to
not
happen for me.
necessarily that. I think I have good forward thinking, but I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. And but you throw yourself in. And I said, I knew if we're gonna, who needed us? We're a brand new staffing firm, you know, and these clients were dealing with all the other firms and so on, the Robert Halfs of the world, and so on and so forth. So I said, the only way I got to meet these people, and I got to tell them. But they saw a young kid who was a CPA, and we produced. You know, listen, we worked 10, 11, 12 hours a day every day of the week in those first 2 or 3 years.
I wonder what listeners could take away from your experience in this model, right? A lot of business development folks, a lot of folks in sales. What what do you think is sort of the repeatable part of this strategy?
I think people do business with people they like. Okay. They all have choices. If you're in the insurance business, 1,000 insurance agencies out there, you know, but if you get in front of them and you like them and you could bring value to what they're doing, not only in my case, it was not only, you know, the CPA firms, you know, placing people with them and giving them value that way because they needed the people desperately, but also helping them to retain their staff. And in doing so, I got a boatload of candidates, you know, and I told them, I said, that's the reason. I said, if I travel for you, I'll charge you. When I traveled all over the United States, I had to curtail that because it was taking me out of the office too much. But it was a great message for them. So you know, we got very lucky with that. So the bottom line was, you got to try. You got to go out there. You got to knock on doors. You have to be persistent. If you're going to sell, you got to be persistent, and you have to reflect on what value you could give your client and what makes you different. I was a CPA. Most of my competitors weren't CPAs. Okay. And then once I started doing the lecture series at we have state society conferences, and I joined the board. They asked me to join the board. At one point, they asked me to be president. I said, well, I can't be president. I don't even practice accounting anymore. I can't be president of a 40,000 person, you know, society. But, and again, joining these organizations, okay? Nobody does anything in these organizations. So all you have to do is stick your hand up and say, I'll do, and you become a star. So
Oh,
that's another thing
interesting.
I advise young people, whatever their businesses, stop going home and watching Netflix, okay? Find a charity, find a nonprofit organization where you see that these are potential clients. These are people I want to get to know. The most important clients I ever had, I found from the charitable work I did, whether it was Catholic Charities, Brooklyn, Queens, or the Columbus Foundation, or the Thalassemia, Cooley's Anemia Foundation. That's where I met my most critical clients.
Let's talk a little bit about the philanthropic work that you've done. We mentioned in the intro, you've raised over $20 million through the Columbus Citizens Foundation Adopt a Scholar program. It's a staggering number. How did that initiative start?
Well, again, it starts on a shoestring. Okay, I was on the board of the Columbus Foundation when we had about 400 insane Italian American people, very proud of their heritage, very family oriented. And as I joined, I noticed every year or two they'd send out a letter about scholarship giving and so on and so forth. And they, you know, somebody send a check for 200, 500, and they collect a few $1,000s and parcel you know, a scholarship effort, you know, and give 3 or 4 scholarships. Okay, I said, this is, you know, so I'm thinking about this, and I said, you need a program. Okay, you need something that you can sit in front of a person, as I did with the CPA firms. So I started this. I envisioned this Adopt a Scholar program where we'd ask a person to donate either a 4-year scholarship or a perpetual scholarship. A 4-year scholarship was $25,000 that they could pay. over 4 years, but we'd rather have the money up front. And a perpetual scholarship was $100,000. And again, I didn't know this would work, but I went to the president at the time and I said, I want to do this. It took me 2 or 3 times to convince him, and all I needed was to do a brochure. So I did a brochure, and I went back to the board. I was on the board at that time. I think it was treasurer of the foundation, and I asked them for their input on my things. And they said I had a young woman dressed in a cap and gown on the front, and the only comment I got is she doesn't look Italian. I said I'll put a mustache on and she'll look Italian. At any rate, the first day I do this, I go to Mario Gabelli, and Mario says I'm a big supporter of Fordham Prep. I said the high schools are important, and he says I'll do $300,000.
Wow.
Then I call up Larry Oriana, who I didn't know. I knew Mario. These are both members, and Larry said, "What did Mario do?" We went to college together. I said Mario did 300, and he says, "Okay." I can hear him. I can hear the wheels turning. Okay, we'll do 300. I'll do 300. That's 600. Mario calls me up later in the day, and I hardly knew him because I was still a kid. He said, "I want to do 20 scholarships at Fordham Prep." But that. I said, "Matt, that's $400,000. Okay, we'll do 400." So I said, "Well, screw it." I call Larry up, and Larry, I'm sorry to do this to you, but you asked me, and he did 400. He did 400, and I put in 100. We had $900,000 on day one. And then I would go with my little brochure. We sent a brochure to 400 members. And every time I saw a member, I would, would say, "Hey, well, we the other thing, see, you could name the scholarship in the name of a loved one. The Italians are very big in that, honoring their parents and grandparents. You could pick the school, you could pick the major. You just can't pick the student because I know they'd be sending their nephews,
Right.
So we had a separate committee to do the vetting for the students and so on. We publicized that. And it just took off. I put a big plaque up in the foundation right off the bar with the names. Okay, both the annual and the perpetual. And I would tell the person, 100,000 a lot of money. I said, but you're in the 50% tax bracket. It's going to force you $50,000, and then you're going to give me appreciated stock. Okay, so the capital gains, that stock might be worth $1,000, but if you sell it, you got to pick up $200-300 of capital
Wait,
gains.
sorry, Frank. Explain what you're talking about with the appreciated stock.
Okay, if you have a shares of stock that you purchased for $500 and now they're worth $1,000, if you sell it, you have to pick up $500 in capital gains.
Yeah, your basis, right? Yeah,
your basis is okay, and then the $100, the 100 is 20%. So that's only worth $900 to you. But if you give it away, it's $1,000. You get $1,000 deduction.
Got it. Mm-hmm.
So if you have a stock that's worth $50,000 that you bought at $50,000, now it's $100,000 because you guys were fairly well off. Then it's serious money. So that you give appreciated securities. I've used that, so it took the bite out of it. And once I start to put the bulletin, put their name on a plaque, then it just rolled from there. And I got it up to $12 million. And we brought in a terrific fellow, a lifelong friend of mine, Dave Yomarini, as executive director. And his background was sales. It was not sales. It was giving, philanthropy. And he was with us about 10 years and did about $1 million a year. So it was, by the time we got done, it was kind of in the $22 million bracket. And the other thing I did was we had Grand Marshal, Columbus Day Parade. I ran the Columbus Day Parade for 10 years.
In New York City.
I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but we got Emmy awards every year we ran it. I ran it, Emmy nominations. Never won because Macy's Thanksgiving.
I didn't realize they gave out Emmys for parades.
No, they give out. It's local stuff.
Okay, got it.
And but the Macy's would win every year. I mean, they had probably a $20 million, $30 million budget. I didn't have a dime. I had a 75-year-old woman help